I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, very simple.
Maybe not so simple. Donald Trump imposes global tariffs but leaves Canada off the list. Tonight, why this country dodged the economic bullet sprayed from the lawn of the White House at economies around the world.
President Trump has just announced a series of measures that are going to fundamentally change the international trading system.
We've got all the details on the new tariffs, the ones in force and those still looming.
How have things been for you in this industry in the last few months?
Terrible, actually.
The impacts are wide, markets furious, consumers and businesses confused. And in a federal election campaign, the politics fierce.
We must be an economic fortress that can defend itself.
Canada caught a break, but it's still part of a global economy that just got punched in the gut.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrienne Arsenault.
Thank you for joining us. After months of anticipation and global anxiety, Donald Trump has finally unveiled the centerpiece of his tariff plan, one that hits dozens of countries, some at incredibly high rates. But here's a big surprise, one that does not increase levies on Canada. Trump did take verbal shots at Canada, but those mentions stopped when a prop board showed up and he listed some of the nations the U.S. is targeting. The White House later confirmed Canada has been spared from these new reciprocal tariffs, but still faces the ones that were already announced, including autos, steel, and aluminum. We have extensive team coverage tonight on this important development, breaking down the response across the country, the political fallout in Ottawa, and, of course, how the drama unfolded in Washington. So that is where we begin tonight with Katie Simpson on this enormous escalation by the U.S. that could shift the landscape of trade right across the globe.
After so much buildup, months of threats, confusion, and suspense, President Donald Trump entered the White House Rose Garden for the big reveal.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day.
With a pen, Trump fired the next shot in his trade war, signing an executive order imposing a 10% baseline tariff on almost all imports and specific tariff rates for more than 60 countries, starting April 5th, some significantly higher.
Reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal. That means they do it to us and we do it to them.
The president summoned his Commerce Secretary to bring up a chart essentially ranking countries based on fairness.
If you look at that, China, first row, China.
Canadians holding their breath in this moment would soon learn Trump did not target his neighbors. Canada and Mexico are exempt from new reciprocal tariffs because of CUSMA, but the 25% tariffs related to border security and fentanyl are still in place, along with 10% on energy and potash. But the exceptions for CUSMA-compliant goods continue. That didn't stop Trump from airing his grievances, including his exaggerated trade deficit complaints.
In the case of Canada, it's close to $200 billion a year. And I say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? I mean, at what point do we say you got to work for yourselves?
Other countries were not spared. China is hit with a new 35% tariff, Japan 24%, the European Union 20%, and Vietnam 46%. The new tariffs will not be stacked on top of 25% tariffs on foreign-made automobiles, which kick in Thursday. Same for the existing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. On Capitol Hill, Trump's tariff plan is facing significant backlash.
President Trump has dubbed today Liberation Day. And I continue to think how tone-deaf and how arrogant it is.
Senate Democrats were able to pass a resolution that aims to stop some of the tariffs on Canada.
This is a tax, plain and simple, on the American people.
4 Senate Republicans voted to end the emergency declared by Donald Trump to justify the border security tariffs.
There is no emergency. The Canadians have actually been cooperative with us and said they will try to do even more. But the problem isn't in Canada.
The setback is only symbolic for the president. The resolution will be killed by his allies in the House, but it shows there are some cracks in his support among Republicans. The Trump administration is warning Americans about what it calls short-term bumps. Life is about to get more expensive here, though the White House says in the long run, this will motivate companies to move production to the U.S. and create new jobs.
And Katie, let's get back to Canada now, because the exclusion from these reciprocal tariffs, I think it's fair to say, was a surprise.
Yeah, Canadian officials were told Canada would be hit. And in his speech, Trump called out protections on Canadian dairy and the trade deficit, saying he's not going to take it anymore. So when the White House handed out this 8-page list of countries, I was furiously looking through it for Canada, and it wasn't there. It's just a reminder of how unpredictable this administration is.
All right, Katie Simpson in Washington. Now, immediately following Trump's announcement, Prime Minister Mark Carney gathered his advisors in Ottawa to strategize. Ashley Burke looks at how they're responding tonight.
No sign of victory from the Prime Minister after news broke Canada would be spared from Donald Trump's most widespread tariffs yet, hitting almost every country in the world.
It will be negative on the U.S. economy. That will have an impact on us. But the series of measures will directly affect millions of Canadians.
Carney says Trump saved some of the Canada-U.S. relationship, but not all. Tariffs already in place remain. Others hit the auto sector overnight, and more could be coming.
We're going to fight these tariffs with countermeasures. We are going to protect our workers.
Carney pausing his campaign again to meet with his Canada-U.S. Cabinet Committee and advisors.
This should be very clear for Canada. The auto sector is hit very hard, and that is going to have a deep impact. It means that we're going to have to look at how we respond to that.
All of this unfolding on day 11 of the federal election race, pushing leaders to share their plans to take on Trump.
The president is betraying America's closest friend and attacking our economy, proving once again that Canada must end its era of overdependence and weakness. We must be an economic fortress that can defend itself, that can stand up for its own people and put Canada first.
The Bloc Québécois says Trump's actions could have been worse, while the NDP commented earlier in the day.
It's a day that Donald Trump's attacking our workers. And so we've got a message to Donald Trump. New Democrats and workers are going to fight back and defend our jobs and our country.
Mark Carney is meeting with premiers tomorrow and says after that he'll say more about how Canada will respond.
So Ashley, Carney already told Trump when they spoke on Friday that he will retaliate. So what's your sense of what we can expect now?
Yeah, Adrian, so far Canada's hit back with $60 billion worth of countermeasures and has identified another $95 billion worth on American goods that it could hit with tariffs. Sources say the government's trying to find a balance so it can exert maximum pain on the U.S. and minimum pain on Canada. Tonight we heard Carney promising to act with force after saying Trump fundamentally changed the world's trading system.
All right, Ashley Burke in Ottawa. Thank you. Tariffs dominated today's federal election campaign, and our reporters were on the ground with leaders of the main opposition parties.
I'm Evan Dyer covering the Conservative campaign, and Pierre Poilievre just wrapped another rally here in Kingston, Ontario, in front of a very large, enthusiastic and loud crowd. In fact, so loud that it crashed the cell signals in and around the building. He began his remarks by talking about today's announcement from the White House, what he called yet another unfair attack on Canadian workers. And he went on to give more or less his regular stump speech in which he talks about responding to those tariffs and to Donald Trump's economic approach to Canada by building an economic fortress, a strong, resource-driven Canadian economy that he says will not only protect Canadian workers, but also make the country immune to those kinds of attacks in the future.
I'm David Thurton in Winnipeg with the NDP. Jagmeet Singh is trying to stay in the tariff conversation. Singh called Trump an arsonist, setting fire to the North American economy. Now, Democrats largely stand with other political parties opposing Donald Trump, but Singh says his party has a unique vision for protecting workers, which others don't. Things like improving EI, getting rid of the GST on essentials, and price caps on grocery items. The Democrats would also protect key industries like electricity and critical minerals from foreign takeovers. all through what Singh is calling a no-trade clause.
Let's bring in CBC News' chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton. So, Rosie, where does this leave things politically for the Liberal leader when he gets back to campaigning?
Yeah, Adrienne, I mean, obviously what happened today helps reinforce the argument Mark Carney's been trying to make to Canadians, that he's the best suited to take on Donald Trump. He didn't declare any kind of victory because Canada avoided this 10% tariff, because there are, of course, still real threats, and he tried to spell those out for Canadians. The international trading system has been upended. Canada's still going to have these sectoral tariffs, and there will be a negative impact on the U.S. economy from these decisions that will also hurt Canada. So that threat of economic instability, also really helpful politically for Carney. Tomorrow, when he announces the government response, though, he'll need to make sure that he's offering enough support to the right regions and the right workers, and that if the government does go ahead with further counter tariffs, he'll need to make sure that they are not so significant that they provoke the president to change his mind and hit back further.
And then, of course, I mean, there are the other party's leaders, right?
Yeah, and this has been a challenge for them. Since the election started, really, the Conservatives in particular have been struggling to balance how much to talk about Trump versus affordability. We heard from Pierre Poilievre today with what I would say is probably his clearest plan on how he would deal with the president, namely push him to renegotiate the trade deal as soon as possible, and trying to hammer home to Canadians that the Liberals have weakened the Canadian economy up to this point as further evidence they shouldn't get another mandate. But making that case as the Liberal leader has the benefit of acting in his role as Prime Minister is very difficult for the other parties.
All right, Rosemary Barton in Ottawa.
Thanks.
Canada may have been spared from today's new reciprocal tariffs, but word late tonight confirms that announcement, combined with earlier tariffs, is exacting a real-world toll on Canadian workers. Stellantis has told union leaders that its Windsor assembly plant will be down for 2 weeks starting April 7th. Today's tariff announcement reported to be the primary driver of that. It is just the latest indication of the impact of the trade war on Canadian industries. Alison Northcott has more on how it's hitting them.
There is ongoing concern in the auto industry, with 25% tariffs set to come into effect Thursday at midnight. Carl Ambrosiak wanted to shop before that deadline.
I want to get a new car before the price goes up.
While there will be some exemptions for Canadian cars made with U.S. parts, the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association says prices could climb substantially.
Costs will go up for manufacturers, which mean vehicle prices go up. We're estimating prices will go up anywhere between $4,500 US and $10,000 for a new vehicle.
And auto parts going into the U.S. could see a tariff by May 3rd. This factory makes panels and other products with aluminum and steel, which were hit with 25% tariffs last month. There were fears reciprocal tariffs could have pushed that even higher. About half of their clients are in the U.S. They've already lost contracts, laid off staff, and cut shifts.
How have things been for you in this industry in the last few months?
Terrible, actually. I mean, since December, since the very first day that Donald Trump has mentioned there could be tariffs being added, things started to look very different.
Pierre Boulanger estimates the company has paid about $150,000 in U.S. tariffs since March, costs passed on to frustrated customers.
It was the uncertainties is what creates this nightmare at the moment, because business chaos is not good.
Other companies are feeling it too.
If we talk about companies buying aluminum to make products, whether we're talking light poles, window frames, trucks, body parts, or automotive components, I mean, just the threat of the tariffs already had an impact on them, and many lost a lot of or most of their U.S. orders.
Although many Canadian companies have avoided new tariffs for now, the uncertainty is still hanging over them. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
The pressure on Canada's oil and gas sector is the same as it was yesterday, a 10% tariff, though just on oil and gas exports not covered under the Canada-U.S. free trade deal. But as Anis Haidari explains, industry insiders now feel trapped in a troubled trade relationship.
Canada's energy sector potentially spared from tariffs this time around. Many oil and gas companies can still ship to the United States without extra cost if they've done paperwork to prove their products comply with the new NAFTA.
We would need a gasoline pipe.
This energy analyst says in the past it wasn't always worth the trouble.
part of the challenge with crude oil and the way it's shipped is that it is a chemical soup, and these things are all mixed together at kind of unknown levels and at levels that most of the companies can't guarantee at various stages through the supply chain.
Experts say companies are now motivated to figure out that paperwork. But a bigger problem, there's limited pipelines to anywhere else.
We're now the 4th or 5th biggest oil producer on the planet, opening up customers in east-west directions, not all to the U.S. So situations like exactly what we're dealing with are probably not going to occur.
Whether it's industry experts or the companies themselves, the oil and gas sector says the only way to really avoid Donald Trump's tariffs, make sure that Canada can sell to another country if the U.S. is no longer the easiest option. Anis Haidari, CBC News, Calgary.
Senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong joins us now in studio. Peter, can we start with the markets? What's your sense of what the reaction has been to these, sweeping tariffs?
Well, there was good reason to do this announcement after markets closed, because after-hours trading got absolutely clobbered on the news of this, and it just speaks to the fact that investors simply didn't believe that Donald Trump was ever going to go through with this. They always thought it was rhetoric or a threat, not something he was really going to follow through on. And yet here we are. And as these tariffs and the sweeping nature of them became more and more clear through the announcement, the futures markets just got absolutely hammered. We'll see what happens tomorrow morning when North American markets open up, but it's not looking good.
In terms of Canada, to a degree, certainly it appears this country dodged a bullet, not the bullet, but one of the bullets. Realistically, can Canada continue to stay in the clear?
Look, I think that comes down to a more fundamental question about what does Donald Trump really want? Does he want to, on the one hand, reorder global trade that we've built 70 years of trading practices up over? Or is he trying to use this as a negotiating tool? And it seems today that he's handing out these exemptions and carve-outs that maybe it's that. You can't do sort of both things. If he does go ahead and say this is simply a reordering of the global trade order, then all we've done is delay the inevitable and our reckoning will come down the road. If this is just a negotiating tactic and something we now need to work our way through, well, we have a mechanism for that. But it really is something we're going to have to watch for and read how the other countries respond, how the U.S. responds to them, and use that to inform our response to the U.S.
And see what happens tomorrow and read the fine print.
Indeed.
Okay. Peter Armstrong, as always, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Peter mentioned the global market reaction. Well, major stock markets in Asia opened lower Thursday morning. Japan's main stock index fell 4% in early trading after Donald Trump announced a 24% tariff on Japanese imports. Australia's market also saw a drop. And that market reaction evidence of just how vast Trump's global trade war has become.
Our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far.
What the tariffs could mean for Europe next. Plus, Rogers has a new multi-billion-dollar deal to broadcast NHL hockey. But what will that mean for fans?
I think if I was Rogers, I would think very long and hard about what that price point would be for hockey.
And later, they were out for the cherry blossoms, but they got so much more than that.
And my husband's like, that's Obama.
The photobomb they will never forget. We're back in 2.
Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore.
All right, let's recap our top story tonight. Donald Trump's announcement of new reciprocal tariffs against trading partners around the world, and the surprise inside that Canada was not included. For those that are, starting April the 5th, all U.S. imports will face a 10% baseline tariff. More than 60 countries face specific rates. The United States is introducing a 20% tariff across the board on EU imports. Briar Stewart is in Germany tonight. So, Briar, what will be the likely response there?
Well, the EU says, Adrian, that it has a strong plan to retaliate to the U.S. tariffs, but we likely won't see anything immediately. Instead, it will be done in stages. Now, back when the Trump administration introduced the 25% tariff on aluminum and steel in mid-March, the EU introduced levies on billions of dollars of U.S. products, including Harley-Davidson motorcycles and American whiskey. But those tariffs weren't implemented right away, and in part that was because there were fears over escalation. But those tariffs are now expected to take effect in mid-April.
What about the other sectors that the EU could look at retaliating against?
Well, the 27-member bloc is looking at other American products like poultry and beef, and they're also looking at companies that provide services. So, for instance, as part of the EU response, they could choose to suspend intellectual property rights for some U.S. tech companies. Those are some of the discussions that will be taking place in the days ahead. Now, I'm in Germany, a country where the largest export is automobiles. Last year, Germany exported around 500,000 cars to the U.S. Starting on Thursday, they will all be hit with a 25% tariff. And in fact, Mercedes-Benz, one of this country's largest automakers, is saying that it might have to withdraw some of its least expensive models from the U.S. market because over the tariffs and the hit it may have on sales.
All right, Briar Stewart reporting from Hanover, Germany tonight. Thanks, Briar. Israel announced it is cutting a new corridor through the Gaza Strip, occupying more land. We are now dividing the strip and increasing the pressure step by step, said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, so that they will give us our hostages, he said. His announcement came after an Israeli attack killed at least 15 people, including children who were sheltering at a UN-operated clinic. It's part of a wave of airstrikes that local hospitals also say killed at least 28 others across Gaza. There is a new Canadian broadcast deal for the NHL tonight.
There is nothing more valuable in this country from a media standpoint than having the rights to the NHL.
How the multi-billion-dollar deal could affect where you watch hockey. Plus, Canada was spared the worst from Trump's tariffs, but how long will that last? We'll break down what could happen next and the threats that still remain. The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next. Actor Val Kilmer has died at the age of 65.
You need any help? With what? You figured it out yet?
That was Kilmer as Tom Iceman Kazansky in Top Gun, the role that launched him into stardom. He went on to perform in dozens of movies, starring as Jim Morrison in The Doors and The Dark Knight and Batman Forever. Val Kilmer was diagnosed with throat cancer in 2014. He recovered, but suffered permanent damage to his voice. His family says he died from pneumonia on Tuesday, surrounded by loved ones. Well, Rogers has struck a new broadcast rights deal with the NHL, paying a record $11 billion for a further 12 years. But as Jamie Strachan explains, this continuing relationship could change how Canadians watch hockey.
Martyrs in front, scores! How much hockey can Canadians watch? And how much will they pay for it?
There is nothing more valuable in this country from a media standpoint than having the rights to the NHL.
Rogers hopes so. The company just shelled out $11 billion to broadcast NHL games across all platforms for 12 years. The deal more than doubles the value of its current deal, which expires after next season.
The value of live sports content just continues to appreciate, and it's really rooted in viewership continuing to grow.
It's the NHL. But that doesn't mean your favorite NHL team will always be on Rogers-owned platforms. The deal allows it to sub-license some games to streaming services. Currently, Monday night games are on Amazon Prime. So, could more be sold off?
The answer is yes, we'll look to it as a possibility and a strong possibility. As we look to the next 12 years, the agreement with the NHL is that we'll look to opportunities to continue to sub-license where it makes sense.
This sports media journalist says even though Canadians love hockey, Rogers has to be careful.
But I do think in terms of consumers being stretched, in terms of their own budgets, I think if I was Rogers, I would think very long and hard about what that price point would be for hockey.
And hockey fans in the United States.
There's also the question of what role CBC might play in this deal. After more than 70 years of NHL broadcasts, its current contract ends after next season.
We value our partnership with the CBC, and over the next 18 months, we'll look to see if there's a continued partnership there.
With the Stanley Cup playoffs around the corner, NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman says the game will connect with a wider fan base. Rogers is banking on it. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Now it's time to dig deeper into the stories shaping our world. What's the bottom line for Canada as Donald Trump shakes up the world with his Liberation Day tariffs?
European Union, they're very tough. India, Vietnam.
But he seems to spare this country, at least for now. We break down what Canada dodged, the damaging tariffs that are still in play here, and what it all means for the federal election. Let's get the answers. All right, let's bring in Peter Armstrong and Catherine Cullen to help us make sense of this moment. This really needs unboxing, right? What does this mean for Canadians? What does it mean for the world? So, Peter, as our senior business correspondent, did Canada just have a good day?
Yeah, look, I mean, everything's relative, of course. But given the chaos and the disorder and the threats and the tariffs that are already in place and all of the unknowns and all the uncertainty that were leading up to this day where there was a very big threat on the table, it is hard to imagine a scenario that could have unfolded much better for Canada. There are still, as we've heard through the newscast, a lot of threats. There are still existing tariffs. There are still problems on the road ahead. But I think the fact that we dodged as much of the bullet as we did has to be seen as good news. And I think if you listened closely right around 4:30 or so, when we sort of started to figure out what was up here, I think you might have caught the wind of a heaving sigh of relief from boardrooms of CEOs, of policymakers, of union leaders, of just about everybody across the country.
What about Parliament Hill, though? So, Catherine, that's where you always have us covered. And I'm curious what this moment tells you politically.
Well, Adrienne, the tone is definitely very sober. It seemed coming into this that today might be this big inflection point in the election, pushing Canada deeper into economic misery. And certainly with the auto tariffs coming into effect, this is still bad. But the political impact of this day, it is perhaps a bit murkier now. A couple of things to reflect on. One, the likely impact on the global economy, the markets, the knock-on effects for Canada. These reciprocal tariffs could still impact the Canadian economy in that way. Mark Carney's assessment is that this will fundamentally change the international trading system. Two, Donald Trump took aim at Canada's dairy sector. All the major political parties want to protect supply management for dairy and poultry, but particularly with a trade agreement review likely to come up, perhaps sooner than later, it is a reminder that this is a sore point that Trump may focus on.
And this is only today, right? We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or in the days to come. Peter, if we take your presumption that Canada had a good day, what about the rest of the world? Can you set the table for us?
This is going to be catastrophic for many countries around the world. This is, to steal Mark Carney's line via Catherine Cullen, this is a reordering of the global trade system that we've spent 70 years building up, that companies have spent billions of dollars trying to manage and leverage and use to their advantage, is coming undone underfoot. This is going to happen incredibly fast. It's going to hit some countries and some companies harder than others, but it's going to hit all of them and thus all of us in a way that undoing all of this, if that is the true desire of this administration, this is going to be years of undoing. It's going to be billions of dollars in reshoring and reshaping and sort of manufacturing how we trade with one another all around the globe. And that's a very different thing than saying United States alone wants to put up some trade barriers and change the way they import and export and their particular trade relationships. This changes how Europe does business with Asia, how Asia does business with North America, how the entire countries of the world will come together, and all of the trade deals that have been built on the assumption that we're working towards bringing tariffs down, most of them are now thrown into question as well.
Catherine, I mean, this would have been a weird enough day at any time, but being in the middle of a federal election campaign, I'm curious what you're hearing from the campaigns themselves, and if you have any sense of how this is likely to play out on the trail.
Yeah, well, Adrienne and Peter just laid out what a roller coaster of a day it's been, and there really is still a scramble to process what this means. The Liberals, of course, are still the government. Mark Carney said they will be discussing countermeasures to deal with the bigger picture. It would be to Pierre Poilievre's political advantage if Canadians were less concerned about Trump after today. He would rather be talking about affordability, cost of living, but concerns about global markets tend to play more to Mark Carney's strengths and his background in finance, monetary policy. And so you saw today Poilievre trying to blunt some of that, arguing that for Carney, a resume is not a plan. In fact, Poilievre laid out his own plan today, obviously trying to push back against some of that incumbency advantage that Carney seems to be enjoying. Poilievre explaining the measures he would take to try to help protect workers in the face of tariffs, how he would attempt to renegotiate Canada's trade relationship with the United States. Carney has already touched on a lot of that ground, laid out his own vision. It was interesting also to see at the end of the day, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, also a Conservative, putting out a statement suggesting that the worst of this tariff dispute is behind us, which again would benefit Pierre Poilievre politically. It's striking to make a prediction about Donald Trump's behavior. The worst is over. We know that can be a risky proposition, Adrian.
Peter, as we were all looking at that event in the Rose Garden, it's not lost to me that there were people there who are counting on Donald Trump making their lives better, right? In a way, that's almost why they were invited. And they're counting on him making their lives better in a matter of months. And I'm wondering how realistic that is for them.
Look, there are two answers to that. One is we can see it through markets, that investors simply didn't believe that Donald Trump was going to make good on this threat. They thought it was rhetoric, the way he'd sort of threatened to tear up NAFTA or make Mexico build for the wall. They thought this was just a negotiating tactic. And as the threat turned into tariff and if tariffs began to bite and take hold, investors said, well, hold on a second, we got to sell off. This doesn't make any sense because it's bad for business. It's bad for consumers. It's bad for growth. It's bad for inflation. And if a company doesn't pass on the cost of this tariff, then they eat that cost. That's bad for their margins. It's bad for earnings. It's bad for stock markets. If they pass that cost along to consumers, that's bad for disposable income. It's bad for inflation. It's bad for growth. That too is bad for stock markets. So there's that side of the answer. But then you get all these people that voted for Donald Trump because they were so upset about inflation. They wanted to just see a fix. And that was the enthusiasm we saw in markets. In the early days after Trump was elected, they thought he's going to cut regulations, he's going to cut taxes, he's going to boost the economy. Great days are ahead. These are not going to lead to great days ahead, even if they somehow stick to their guns here and manage a way to try to sort of, reshore more manufacturing back to the United States. It's taking billions of dollars and years upon years to get that done. That's not going to address the cost of eggs or the cost of groceries, the cost of whatever it is people are struggling with in the United States. And that is beginning to become clear. And as those two forces, markets falling, consumers getting upset, that's going to put yet more pressure on Donald Trump to, instead of stick to his guns and get the bigger reordering done, he's going to go back to handing out exemptions and carve-outs and workarounds and negotiation tactic. So it's really hard to square those two things and those two responses with what we've been seeing in terms of policy from the White House.
So those are Americans. It's not lost to me that there are Canadians right now who are exhausted. They are confused. They're wondering what sort of business moves that they can make. So for them, what's your sense to each of you of the bottom line in terms of what they need to be looking for next? Catherine, we'll start with you and then with Peter.
Yeah, I think there are quite a few things to watch here. Now that the rest of the world is about to feel some more of what Canada has been feeling, might we work differently with our allies? What do Canadian countermeasures look like? How do Canadians react to this news in the midst of an election? And how does Donald Trump's recent somewhat calmer tone towards Canada, does it last? Does it stick?
Okay, Peter, briefly to you.
Look, I think the most important thing to watch for next is how what the federal government does in terms of retaliation. Remember, if they impose counter tariffs, all that means is that Canadians, you and I and everybody watching this, is going to have to pay more for stuff that's coming in from the United States. Our economy is already in a tough spot. Canadians are already squeezed in terms of cost of living. That's only going to add to that. And I'll be really interested to see how they manage both the message and the actual implementation of policy around this response, especially given that, no, it wasn't a complete victory today, but it was better than a lot of people thought it was going to be going in.
All right, Peter, Catherine, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, Donald Trump's trade war has heads spinning in this country and around the globe. How did it get to this point? We'll break that down next. Trump on the warpath, Canada on edge. We break down the shots fired so far.
Canada's a very bad abuser.
It's been week after grueling week of threats and taunts and tariffs. that already sting.
There's already economic damage.
Hanging in the balance, your job, maybe your bills, and sometimes it seems your country. Here's Eli Glasner on how we got here and where it could all lead.
Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore.
So here we are. Liberation Day has arrived, and with it, tariffs from much of the world.
Can you talk to me about which businesses have already been affected?
How long have you got? The good news, Canada's been spared from Trump's new global 10% baseline tariff, but it's already dealing with tariffs targeting the auto sector, steel, and aluminum. So how did we get here? Let's go back.
Started with inauguration. He had something like 26 executive orders.
January 20th. Trump announces 25% tariffs on products from Mexico and Canada, theoretically to stem cross-border immigration and drug smuggling.
Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
February 3rd. Stock markets falling. Trump hits the snooze button, putting across-the-board tariffs on hold for a month. March 4th. The president implements 25% tariffs on all goods and 10% on Canadian oil and energy, citing the trade deficit.
We pay subsidies to Canada and to Mexico of hundreds of billions of dollars, and the United States will not be doing that any longer.
So he views certain countries as treating the U.S. poorly and as having different tariff structures that their goods face, and so he's going to reply or respond in kind.
Canadians are reasonable, and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight.
March 4th. Canada hits back with $30 billion in reciprocal tariffs, everything from pizza, peanut butter, and shampoo, and targeting exports from key Republican districts, such as Kentucky bourbon and Florida orange juice.
Things that we knew would get noticed by key states that are critical to the Trump presidency, that helped elect him to office.
March 6th, another pause. Products that qualified under CUSMA, the pre-existing trade agreement between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, won't be tariffed. That exception still stands.
March 11th.
Another dismal day watching the Dow.
Trump threatens major tariffs for steel and aluminum. March 12th, the punishing 25% steel and aluminum tariff goes into effect.
Canada is the largest steel exporter to the U.S. Canada is the largest aluminum exporter to the U.S. In fact, these are tariffs that were applied globally, but affect Canada very much disproportionately.
We're seeing job losses. We're seeing plant slowdowns. Hopefully not plant shutdowns. But this is a key sector.
I am announcing that the Government of Canada, following a dollar-for-dollar approach, will be imposing 25% reciprocal tariffs. This includes steel products worth $12.6 billion and aluminum products worth $3 billion.
March 26th, Trump targets the auto sector.
What we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States.
Those tariffs set to take effect on Liberation Day. March 27th, the new Prime Minister gives a wake-up call to Canadians.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation, is over.
Which brings us to today. Trump promising a golden age for America.
We could be so much wealthier than any country, it's not even believable.
While some experts forecast a dire downturn for Canada.
How worried are you about a recession?
Our modeling shows that a recession is just about guaranteed if this retaliatory tariff environment continues.
Some dark clouds on the economic horizon.
So, Eli, it's interesting because the U.S. president is promising a golden age for America. How realistic is that?
What he is talking about is this incredibly dramatic shift, bringing manufacturing home, reshoring these companies, a lot of companies that have left America for a more economically favorable environment, things like lower wages. And a lot of the experts that we talk to say such an operation would be expensive and immense. We are talking a time span of easily
a decade, and the cost, billions and billions of dollars. You need to find the staff, you need to build those factories, and during all of this transitionary period, there's a very real risk that GDP begins to fall and inflation, which was just wrestled under control, begins to rise. And that's why some of the experts we talked to say that historically, there's a reason that tariffs have actually fallen out of fashion. They just don't work that well.
Yeah, really nerve-wracking time. Eli Glasner, thank you.
My pleasure.
So here's something else Eli's been working on, an interview with the Canadian-born legend. During a golden age of magazine journalism, Graydon Carter took the reins of Vanity Fair and turned it into a powerhouse. The job made him a magnet for the rich and famous. Here's a quick peek at what he said about dining with Donald Trump.
My wife and I had dinner with him and Melania sometime after they got together, and firstly, he talked so much my hair was moving. It was like those old Max L ads. She didn't say a single word. I think that that is a sort of one-way conversational relationship. I mean, he pretends like he's masculine, but you know, the masculinity doesn't involve bullying or whining, and he is a chronic bullier and a chronic whiner, and that was sort of that was evident back then, but it's like on steroids now.
But there is what you're describing, like he wants to be the center. He wants to be, he's talking, he's commanding the attention. Yes. He wants to be the center of whatever I imagine is happening.
Yes. He thinks all press is good press, except it drives him crazy when it's not perfect.
And you said in '91, there's a quote from you that he would either hide away and be forgotten or become like the world's worst Bond villain.
In 1991, I said he'd either become the most powerful person in the world, or that he'd be storing his urine in mason jars like you know, Howard Hughes. Possibly I got both of them right. I don't know.
Well, what do you think you saw back then? What did you suspect?
Well, I was being glib, first of all. I didn't actually think he'd be the most powerful person in the world, but he did have a lot of the elements of a future Bond villain, but actually Elon Musk has sort of taken that spot.
You can look for the full interview Friday on The National. Coming up, when a former president just strolls into your family photo shoot.
He's like, that's Obama. I was like, what? I was like, well, did we get a picture?
The presidential photobomb next in our moment. Okay, those kids are so cute, but look, right there in the background, yes, that is former President Barack Obama just out for a stroll in Washington, D.C. Portia Moore had taken her family out for a photo shoot with the beautiful cherry blossoms, but when they checked the pictures, they were shocked. The presidential photobomb is our moment.
He's like, that's Obama. I was like, what? I was like, well, did we get a picture? My two kids are standing right here for their own picture. Of course, I'm paying attention to my son, making sure he doesn't run into the water. And my husband's like, that's Obama. I didn't know he was saying that. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm making sure I'm looking at Preston right now. After they're done with their shoot, I then pick Preston up.
Then we saw like the Secret Service people, and we're like, was that just Obama? And they were like, yeah.
And then we went to the photographer. I was like, well, did we get a picture? Like she scrolled back and we were like, we got it.
Usually I'm editing all the tourists out of the backgrounds for all my clients anyways, but this is the one photo that I will not be editing out this person.
Then Portia posted it on her Instagram and tagged President Obama, and he reposted her post and he's like, sorry kids for photobombing your picture. It's the cutest thing ever. I don't know, it's all cute.
Priceless, priceless.
Thank you, President Obama.
Oh, Belle is amazing. And here's a really weird thing. Belle was just learning about President Obama in Black History Month. In fact, she was part of a video recording reciting lines from a speech he made in 2008 that said, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Isn't life weird? From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.